Hello. So this time I'm going to talk about two Wishbone episodes. One based on the Moliere play, The Imaginary Invalid, which is not in that book back there, so I did not get to read it before watching the episode, and an episode based on the Edgar Allan Poe short story, The Purloined Letter, which is in this giant book here, and so I did get to read it before the episode. I hadn't previously read it. I remembered the episode. I thought it was something different, which I'll get to. Um, but I realized I hadn't read it, and this book I rarely crack for some reason. It's intimidating, but I knew that it was in here because it says complete, and so I managed to read it. I'm not going to hold the book up the whole time like I normally would because it's very heavy. But when I get to that, I will get to that. First was The Imaginary Invalid. The Wishbone episode is called The Canine Cure, which is accurate because it's about allergies. And much like Nathaniel's mother thinks he is, I am allergic to dogs and cats and various nuts and berries and grasses and the droppings of dust mites. Here's the thing, nobody's actually allergic to dust. Some people have a genuine allergic reaction to the droppings that dust mites leave behind. The reason everybody has a negative reaction when dust gets up their nose is nothing is supposed to go up your nose. And dust gets up there and is very irritating. It's not an allergy, it's a physical defense. You sneeze to get the dust out of your nose. Allergies are different. But again, I'm not an expert on allergies. I've looked that up a couple of times because it's an interesting thing. Everybody's always saying that they have a dust allergy, and I'm thinking it's just don't let things get up your nose. That's what the masks are for. And this episode once again made me like the one where Sam had allergies. It reminded me, if anybody knows of like the definitive book on allergies, something more substantial than the Wikipedia article about allergies, I would really like to get to know allergies better than I do just from a lifetime of experiencing them. I want to study them, and I want legitimate sources. Nothing against Wikipedia, but it's short compared to a book. And so I have opinions about the way allergies are dealt with on the show, but I'm not as confident in them as I should be, but I am pretty confident from, again, a lifetime of allergies. But first, the play, I had wondered, Moliere's not technically the French Shakespeare, but kind of a really well-known classical playwright, but his stuff was, and I'm no expert on Moliere either, but his stuff was tended to be farcical, and that is how it is presented. It's like the Romeo and Juliet episode of Wishbone, where it was presented as a play. I don't remember if there was much to do with the audience there, but since the Imaginary Invalid is a farce, the audience reaction was more important than it necessarily would be with Romeo and Juliet. So there were people dressed as, what would this be? Not Renaissance, not Reconstruction. I used to know the theater terms. Something. It begins with an R, probably. And although those might be British theater terms. Anyway, so they did have people dressed like they were from that era for the audience, and then they had people in costumes up on stage. And The Imaginary Invalid is about a man who believes himself to be sick even though he is not, and his wife is keeping him that way because she wants to convince him that he's going to die so that she can inherit stuff, and he wants his daughter to marry a doctor so that he can get free service because he's also miserly, like Silas Marner. And Wishbone plays Moliere playing Argon. I don't know if that's a thing that Moliere did. I don't know much about Moliere, but it's, again, an interesting way of presenting it and introducing the little bit at the end of the episode where they explain some technical piece of how the episode came together was about how they had kind of a rotating stage with different rooms set up so that the action could move quickly. Like the stage had was divided into 3 stages, and they just turned it so that people could enter and exit different rooms more quickly. So that's that. And it was an interesting episode for that reason, but also for the allergy thing. So the premise in the real world is that Nathaniel, who we remember from another Sam centric episode, where I forget, it's the one that's not the glass menagerie, but it was something else. I forget exactly which one it was. Possibly Joan of Arc, possibly something else. No, Joan of Arc was the field hockey episode. The Joan of Arc was the one where she was going to play on the boys' team, and then it wasn't technically okay. I don't know. So it's the one I remember not because she almost drops and shatters a glass unicorn, and Nathaniel saves it, and it turns out he's a great goalie. He is going to sleep over at Joe's house, and he brings, as I sometimes did when I would sleep over at my friend's house, a lot of medications, including emergency stuff. They don't mention inhalers or EpiPens, but a lot of vitamins. And so he's not a hypochondriac, but his mother is one on his behalf. It's that type. And I don't know that I've ever met that mother or that kid, but it's definitely popular in sitcom type situations. So he brings all of these, a dehumidifier, or is it a humidifier? I think it's a humidifier. It's the one that sprays water vapor into the air. And lists of the medications he has to take and when, things he is allergic to, and things that they have not confirmed that he's allergic to, but they suspect. And I have a feeling that list includes everything. But his mother comes to drop something off in the middle of the episode and sees Wishbone and say, "Oh, he's allergic to dogs too." Or he says, "No, it's not on the list." And then she takes the list and writes dogs in. Now, allergy to dogs is somewhat common, so if she's worried about him being allergic to everything, she would be worried about him being allergic to dogs. But then he starts sniffling and sneezing, and as Joe points out, he was hanging out with Wishbone the whole afternoon before his mom told him he was allergic to dogs, and he started acting like he was allergic to dogs. And so you can probably see where this is going. Wishbone is cooped up so that he cannot interact with Nathaniel, but he escapes rather cleverly, and ends up sleeping next to Nathaniel in Joe's room, and nothing bad happens. Now Nathaniel is not actually allergic to dogs. I am, and when I would go to friends' house who had dogs, or most of my relatives had dogs, when I would visit them, the rooms tend to be vacuumed, and the dogs put in the other room were kept in. They had cages outside. Dogs like to be outside, but it's important to keep them tied up so they can't wander away, but give them plenty of rope so that they can wander about. And I had years and years of allergy shots, which have subdued many of my allergies, including that one to dogs. I'm also allergic to cats, and I grew up with cats. And that wasn't always fun, but we loved them. And then both of the cats that were around when I was born died when I was very young, but then we got new cats when I got into high school, and my allergies had been somewhat tamed, but we started with a hypoallergenic cat, and that's funny that Wishbone, when Nathaniel's mom says he's allergic to dogs, Wishbone goes, "No, I'm hypoallergenic." Nobody can hear Wishbone, but Wishbone knows that there's a new kind of hypoallergenic dogs like golden doodles, and so it's just funny. I'm one of those new hypoallergenic dogs. It's a funny line to say that nobody hears. He's got quite a wit, that Wishbone, and the voice actor too. Just when he's playing Moliere, playing Argon, is probably the most exaggerated and ridiculous that he's been, and so that's fun to hear him just kind of cut loose for the farce of it all. But anyway, so those cats that we got in high school, when I was in high school, they hung around for a while through college, and so I would go away to college and then moved away to New York City, but would come back and visit. And the thing about allergies is that you can acclimate to, if it's an environmental thing. So like the cats, hanging around the cats, when I first would get back home from being away for a long period of time, entering the home of the cats I got itchy in my throat. I got sneezy and sniffly. But after a couple of days, it wasn't, unless they were licking me or I was burying my face in their fur, which I sometimes did, it wasn't that bothersome. And that might also be the years of allergy shots. I don't know exactly what they did, except it's exposure over and over again in small, manageable ways. That's what allergy shots are, I believe, and so that kind of like a vaccine, I suppose. But anyway, this is why seeing an episode like this and thinking, I think that she's overdoing it, but I'm not absolutely sure because even though I have this affliction, I'm not a scientist. So that's why I want to get around to reading these things. Let's see, anything else that I wrote down that I wanted to think that I wanted to mention. There's a little theater lesson about that at the end. And that's all that I wanted to mention. I'm very interested in allergies. And also now, so I got the Moliere book. It's Tartuffe and other plays. There's a revival of Tartuffe on Broadway. Somebody I cared about was in it, I forget. But it made me interested in Moliere and thinking, oh, this is a major theater figure. I am getting into theater. I want to. And then I didn't read it. I still haven't read it. But it's there, and it's one of the few books that I have left that I have not read since the beginning of the pandemic. So I will be getting to it within a few months, probably. But The Imaginary Invalid is not in there. Moving right along, The Purloined Letter. So I remembered this episode, but I thought I conflated it with a later episode based on a Sherlock Holmes story called Scandal in Bohemia. And that came about 50 years after this story. So this story came first, 1845. Then Scandal in Bohemia, I think, was the 1890s or so. But both have to do with the idea of hidden in plain sight. And both have to do with distractions in the street outside of a person's home. It's possible that Arthur Conan Doyle ripped off Edgar Allan Poe, but I will, when I get to that episode, I'll see it more clearly, and I will know. I don't want to just throw around accusations. The Wishbone episode, of course, is called the Purloined Letter, and I think at some point in the episode, Wishbone says he's not a cat. Oh, no, I wrote down Wishbone plays a cat in this episode because he's going around, he's looking for a squeaky toy that is hidden in plain sight, but he can't see it because it's in plain sight and hidden. He doesn't know to look for it where he doesn't have to look for it, and so he's looking for it, and he knocks things off the table, and so I wrote Wishbone plays a cat. If he actually were a cat, it would have been called the Purloined Letter. The episode would have been. So, as mentioned, it's about something being hidden in plain sight. The Purloined Letter is a letter written to, and they're very cagey about identity in the story, because it's so sensitive an issue. In the Wishbone episode, referred to as the Queen. The Queen has a letter from somebody. I don't think we ever find out the exact nature of it, but she doesn't want the king to know that it exists. But the king and some minister come to visit while she's reading it, and she can't hide it in time. So, and the minister person notices this and steals it, and she knows that he has it. But the police search him and his living quarters up and down, cannot find it because it's hidden in plain sight. So that is, and the Wishbone character in this episode, which I guess is C. Auguste Dupin. I guess there are 3 Poe stories about this detective, and he is a Sherlock Holmes type detective. He notices things that other people wouldn't notice, or Monk, a more modern, or House, Monk and House. Those are the modern Sherlock Holmes / Dupins. So he ultimately figures out the secret and finds the letter. So in this episode, Joe has a crush on his history teacher, and so he does, like, while she's lecturing, he is doing one of those crosswords where he writes out her name, and then he writes words up and down that he feels describe her. Words like excellent and cool. and apparently, as she tells him, he spells excellent wrong. This new character named Curtis, a bully type, sees Joe doing this and steals the letter, wanting to blackmail Joe. Actually, he doesn't want to blackmail Joe. He wants to embarrass Joe by making copies and posting it all over the school. So it's not quite the same as the blackmail in the Poe story, but it is similar. The teacher, notices Curtis taunting Joe with the paper and takes it herself. And then Joe and Curtis are both trying to find it. And it takes Joe the whole episode naturally to figure out, maybe I'm just not looking at this right. Maybe I should be looking in plain sight. Now, we see inside Joe's locker at school, and there's a skull in it. And at first, my first thought was, why is there a skull? But then I remembered it looked kind of like the skull from his creature that he builds out of bones that Wishbone brings him for the science fair in a previous episode. So I'm just going to go with that being the reason he has a skull in his locker. Let's see. Joe. Oh, he's the way that he finds out he's got to think differently about finding it is that he's studying with David and Sam, who don't play huge roles in either of these episodes. He's studying with them, and he's looking for a piece of paper that's got important information for studying, and he can't find it because it's right there in front of him. And Wishbone, somehow, Joe doesn't seem bothered by the fact that Wishbone finds exactly what he was looking for and practically hands it to him, but Wishbone points it out, and that's how Joe comes to the conclusion it's not hidden. But then he also gets a call from Curtis. Curtis is at school in detention from having searched through the teacher's desk and been caught, and he says he's going to find it. And so Joe rushes back to the school and sets Wishbone loose in the school to distract the janitor, and then the teacher, Miss Malloy, I think, and Wishbone just runs around the school. The janitor runs around the school. Naturally, it being a kid's show, the janitor does more damage and knocks more things over than the dog. And then Wishbone's his escape, the way that he escapes the janitor, is this girl in a wheelchair comes along, and Wishbone stops in front of her, and she says, "Come here, Wishbone," and Wishbone hops up onto her lap, and she covers him with a blanket, and the janitor runs by, and we haven't seen this girl. Maybe she's in future episodes, but she knows Wishbone, which means she probably is friends with Joe, and hopefully, again, I don't remember her from other episodes, but hopefully there's more of her. So there's that. Joe solves his problem. The detective in the Poe story solves his problem. It's a Wishbone episode. So let's see any more. Oh, and then at the very last bit, Curtis tries to trick Joe into thinking he has the paper, but Joe already has it at that point. And we've learned that the teacher read it. So that's the Purloined Letter, the Purloined Letter, the Imaginary Invalid, the Canine Cure, literally the Canine Cure, the cure for Nathaniel's hypochondriacal existence was a dog. Next Monday, The Time Machine, which is a book that not only do I have it on hand, but I've been reading it to YouTube. Funny thing happened today. I was getting just to the end of what I was reading, and I read it as it appears in the book, the word gloves, and as I was finishing reading, this kind of distracted me and threw me off a little bit. I realized that probably should say globes, and then I checked Project Gutenberg, which is where you can find out-of-copyright literature, all on the website and accurate for the most part, and it does confirm that it should have been globes. So I didn't re-record it, but I did put a little note in there, and you can, I'm reading 4 pages a day. I've been doing for 21 days. I don't know what page I'm on, although I could probably do the math. 84, probably. But you can start from the beginning and hear, at this point, more than half of The Time Machine. But on Monday I'll be watching, or for Monday I'll be watching that episode of Wishbone, and also it just says The Adventures of Robin Hood. I guess it's based on the legend, not any particular version. Like Joan of Arc is a historical figure. There are many versions. They use the Mark Twain version. So we'll see if Wishbone, when he pulls the book off the bookshelf or whatever, if it has an author name. But just says The Adventures of Robin Hood for now. So anyway, let's swag another tale.